Thanks for coming over. Before we get into systems and frameworks, I'd love to start with you. You've worked at the sharp end of procurement and public contracting, UK, Europe, national institutions. When you look back over the last 10, 15 years, what fundamentally has changed in how the public sector thinks about value?
Yeah, thanks. I've been in procurement now, about 35 years in total. And yeah, in public sector procurement, I joined the public sector in 2010. So right at the start of austerity, actually. It was both a good and bad time to be joining the public sector from a procurement standpoint. I think procurement has always been about more than just cost savings. People who would characterize procurement as cost savings don't really understand procurement. I've been in it, as I say, 35 years, and there's always been more to it, and there's always value that you're looking to drive. But the big change that happened in the 2010s was the introduction of the Social Value Act, and social value being more important to the public sector. And it's right, isn't it? The public sector spends a lot of money, so it should be doing it in the right way. And that shouldn't just focus on the core procurement things of the price or the product or the service or the kind of simple value of that. But it's a really big lever to make social change in the country. So why not add in social value? I think it's a great idea. So that has been a change over those kind of 15 years as that has developed and matured. And that's what we're kind of seeing is this. We've seen this shift from looking at the value of the product or service or contract you're delivering and rounding that out with social value. It's always a challenge because budgets are tight. Everybody wants the product or service that they want for the right price, and to add in another factor just makes it more complex. It makes it more difficult to balance those and get what you need. But it's the right thing to do, given how much the public sector spends.
Yeah, from what I understand, obviously when you have the Social Value Act 2013, government imposes something or suggests something, there's different rates of take up and different rates of understanding for that. So when would you say social value started becoming unavoidable rather than optional, which I think it was early days?
Yeah, I mean, an act's an act, but it did say that you needed to consider social value in your procurements, and that's a pretty broad term and relatively simple to demonstrate compliance. But the leading authorities were right there at the outset and were looking to embed social value in their contracts. The challenge with all of these things is time, skill, kind of priorities, all of the things that prevent us from doing anything. So adding another factor into an already complex process meant that some organizations just didn't have the capability or the time to embrace it, whilst other more forward leading ones did. Over the last, there isn't an authority in the country that isn't considering social value in its procurement anymore. That absolutely has happened. There's still, like with anything, a mix of capabilities and a mix of success rates. But it's definitely something that has become obligatory for every authority.
So, I mean, my next question was, did it arrive with clarity or confusion? But I think you've kind of answered. Was it just more of a progressive?
Yeah, more progressive. I think. I don't think any government legislation lands with clarity. It takes time to embed these things because there's such a variable nature of the authorities that you're looking to embed it in. The contracting authorities across the UK vary from massive, central government bodies or NHS trusts down to relatively small local councils. So you can't legislate clearly for all of those different organisations. It just doesn't happen. So people have to interpret and work it out and get there in the end. There's some element of trialing before you get to solutions that start to work.
Yeah. I mean, if we're honest, social value starts as a good idea, but good ideas don't always survive contact with delivery, I suppose. That's a really important point. From your perspective, where does social value work well, and where has it quietly broken down?
Um, Yeah, you're absolutely right. Again, any kind of good idea or legislation or whatever it might be, any policy is dependent on the ability of the organisations to then go and deliver it, and that's variable. And so you have some who do it really well and some who don't. But it does. There's a real risk, particularly with social value, that it becomes either a box ticking exercise, or it measures the wrong thing, or it just doesn't deliver the social value that you'd hoped. And I think we have fallen into, in some instances, social value being delivered, but it's not the social value that you need, or evidence that there's been social value delivered. But if you actually go down to the kind of coalface, it's not really there. It's data before actual delivery, and I think that's been an issue. It's difficult to get all of those things lined up, and sometimes people can kind of default into, well, I've done it, or I've done. I lose count of the number of times where somebody says, "Oh, we added £1 million worth of social value from this," and there's no. It's very difficult to really see that £1 million worth of value.
Tangible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think part of the problem initially, or as these mechanisms are developed, is about procurement, asking procurement teams to evidence things that the system itself wasn't designed to measure?
I think procurement, the kind of standard way of procuring has been in existence for many years, and it hasn't really changed significantly since I started in procurement. You put a tender together, you put a request for quotation, you get suppliers telling you what price it is and how well they meet your specification. Great, been doing that for years. Then to add social value in over the top of that was where it becomes a bit more challenging, to add that into the specification, to understand how you measure it, to understand how you score it, to understand what's this bit of social value worth compared to that bit of social value, has been a real challenge, and it has perhaps been too complex, or indeed too simple in the way that it's been delivered.
Sure. But do you feel that some of those hurdles procurement teams are getting over? There are new systems.
I think, well, there's very little in the way of systems. I think procurement systems generally, it's been a mantra of mine ever since I've been in the procurement profession. I think that procurement systems are underinvested in, just generally across the public and private sector. You see the tools that are available to your finance teams, or your sales and marketing teams, or your HR teams, and procurement's left behind from a systems perspective, generally. Add in social value, which is quite specific to the public sector. Public sector is not awash with money. Software companies are not knocking down the door to try and add, new great functionality to already aging systems. So, we don't see a lot of good kind of software in this area.
I think as well, from my experience with local authorities over the last decade, there appears to be a lack of resource when coming to validate outputs, validate that which is reported.
Yeah.
I mean, the phrase which I've heard in lots of occasions, not just from procurement teams, but other funding teams, there's a situation of marking your own homework is a common measurement problem, or it's perceived. And it's a phrase that we keep coming back to. Most of social value reporting still relies on retrospective surveys, estimates, or proxy values. From a governance and audit perspective, how risky is that?
Yeah, I think said right at the top of this, I came in at the start of austerity, and it's not got any better. There isn't a load of money available to resource up adequately in councils. Councils are spending all of their money on health and social care, and there's very little to actually robustly measure these things, and so you have to make do with what you've got, and you rely on that. There is a large reliance on suppliers self-reporting, and you're absolutely right. That creates its own risk. It creates its own risk in terms of suppliers marking their own homework, and you not actually being able to evidence the difference that it makes to your citizens in your borough, in your city.
Sure, yeah. It's not to say that I'm saying that people are out there to game the system. It's less about bad actors and more about poor infrastructure in a way.
Yeah, exactly. I think almost all suppliers to the public sector want to do a good job, but they don't want to spend a load of money on social value. So they're trying to understand just what is it that they can deliver, and how do they get to a point where it's enough for the customer, and where the evidence is enough for the customer. And if we don't challenge it robustly and audit it, at the moment it's just not being kind of measured properly.
It's interesting, eh? I mean, if this were financial reporting rather than social value reporting, would we tolerate this level of uncertainty, do you think?
I mean, there's no, we wouldn't, because there's laws around financial reporting, and there's audits, etc. And this, if you don't measure it quite as strictly, you open yourself up to not having quite a strict kind of results from your kind of reporting.
I kind of have a look at sort of real-time data, which I suppose is in short supply in current procurement delivery of social value. One things we've learned from Bradford and Wakefield is that live data helps councils understand what's actually going out directly within the public.
Yeah.
No, not because, and from that point of view, not to be a policeman on it, not to be punitive, but to be able to understand what's going on because it's visible. From your experience, what happens inside an organisation when information moves from quarterly reports to daily insights?
Yeah, I mean, I think the kind of wave of technology that we're in means that we should be able to have more data at our fingertips on a more kind of frequent basis. And I think that's the examples of Bradford and Wakefield show that there is an ability to report in real time the activity in the region. And that is a world of difference away from quarterly a supplier submitting a return and telling you something that you've got no kind of assurance over. So yes, it makes a massive difference if you've got the data at your fingertips, because you can change course. There's no point in looking in the rearview mirror 3 months out to see how you're going to change course if you've got stuff coming in immediately. And of course, it's not just about having the data. We all know that we've got loads of data and very little insight, but it's being able to get that data into a way that you can make decisions on, and make those decisions quickly, that then change the course and continue to deliver more and more social value for your citizens.
We often describe it less like compliance and more like a health monitor, the way that we're looking at doing things at Citizen Coin: heart rate, temperature, early warning signs. Does that analogy resonate with how public systems should work?
Yeah, I mean, it's just going back to my previous point about this wave of technology. We're all moving from having your heart rate taken once a year at your doctor's to it being on your watch on a minute by minute basis. And that's what we should be putting into the public sector reporting. And you're absolutely right. Having that health of your supplier contracts reported on a daily basis makes a massive difference. Nobody would really want to go back to, well, there's a reason why health monitoring and personal health monitoring is a big sector now, because the value of real-time data is huge. And I said that you had your heart rate taken once a year at the doctor's, but you probably didn't. It might be 5 years, and you get the same with supplier data. They maybe miss a month or miss a quarter, or before you know it, you're into the final year of the contract, and nobody can quite remember who's supposed to collect that data, and nobody's looked at it, and it's just all kind of died a death.
And then well, that's a whole new wave of contracts to roll on with.
Yeah, people come and go, and you end up with the contract manager who looked after it in the first 2 years is no longer about.
And equally, I think one of the risks with better data, I think from an organisational point of view, those who were delivering the social value, I think some might be worried that it's used as a stick in some way. And I think it's really important that when we've got more accurate data and live data, that it's used to course correct.
Yeah.
And to manage what's going on, to understand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, and absolutely is to course correct. But suppliers should be held to account for what they promise in the tender as well. That's a fundamental thing that I believe in, and we should not be afraid of saying, is when you go out to market for goods and services and a supplier bids, the price that they bid should be the price that we pay. The service level that they bid should be the service level that we get. And the social value that they bid should be the social value that we get. And we shouldn't be afraid of making sure that those things happen. We owe that to the taxpayer. We owe it to the other suppliers who are bidding. You're inevitably in any kind of tender, you might have 6, 10, 20 different suppliers bidding, and you're only ever going to choose one. If you get down to the contract, you're probably going to just choose one. Well, all those others, you owe it to them to make sure that the supplier delivers what they said they're going to deliver. Otherwise, you should have chosen somebody else.
Yeah.
And so, whilst it shouldn't be a stick, we should absolutely hold suppliers to account. And at the moment, if we're not measuring it, we're not holding them to account. We don't know that we're getting the value that was promised, and that's poor for everybody.
Yeah, we read a piece of research, and I think it was 23, 24. If you have the UK procurement system within local authorities, more than 50% of the tenders were won with the strongest social value statement.
Mm-hmm.
So if each of those statements, because it's in a lot of cases it's worth 10% of the tender value, if those statements aren't delivered, that does seem a little unfair.
Yeah, I mean, this has been the case throughout my whole career. Is the value of contracts just leaks away over time. The procurement people do a job of getting the bids in, and then after a year, 18 months, the supplier creeps the price up or drops the quality of service, or all that value always leaks away. And what we need is technology helping us to make sure that those things get delivered. And that's how we solve this problem that's been a perennial problem in procurement the whole time.
Brilliant. That's a nice segue as well, because I was about to then talk about technology, AI, optimization, joined up government. Looking forward, once you have reliable, active level data, places, people, time, outcomes, AI becomes less scary and more useful. From your perspective, where could AI actually help public authorities?
Well, I think there's two factors here. One is that we've already spoken about. One is a lack of resource, and therefore lots of data, but no time for insight, and no time to actually take action on what the data's telling you. And the second bit is what you just said about accurate data, timely data, the right sort of data. So we're building systems now that will capture all of that data, but we need the insight and the capability on the kind of council side to act on that data. And with the best will in the world, the more data you throw at it isn't going to create more resource on the other side to actually take those actions. Everybody is time constrained. So AI is a great way of analyzing that and kind of giving you the summary or the actions that should be taken from that data. So I think it's going to be crucial. It's going to be transformative over the next few years. It's really difficult sat here to know exactly where that's going to go. But there's no question that when you have a system designed to capture valuable data, and you've got a human kind of resource issue where you haven't got enough people to analyze that data, just throwing more data at it isn't going to solve the problem. What you need is adding some intelligence to it, and that intelligence will come through artificial intelligence, and I think it'll be transformative.
From our experience working both in the public and the private sector, large organizations, I think what do you think to this, that AI can help break silos between departments, start joining things together and understanding of what's going on. For example, if you've got 4 departments funding an activity in the same postcode, do we really need 4 delivery routes? And I think often from experience, sometimes that happens in local authorities and within all large organizations, simply because they're not quite sure what each other are doing. Do you think that AI could help resolve some of those issues?
Yeah, I mean, AI doesn't really care about your org chart. It doesn't care what the department structure says. I guess the key thing here is generating the data and having that data available across the whole org. If everybody's just writing down in the book the postcode they went to, well, it doesn't matter how much AI you throw at it. If it's on a piece of paper in somebody's book that they've been somewhere, then it's not going to see it. But yeah, we've now got systems that will produce this data. And again, back to my previous point, we haven't got people who will look at that and join up those dots and take action and make recommendations. They just don't exist. We've done a lot of work on the data side. It's AI that will unlock some of that value, because it will see patterns and kind of challenge norms that we just don't have the time, capability, or people resource to do.
So hopefully help reduce the high pressure and the stress that a lot of staff are under.
Yes, I mean, I think the big promise of AI is to do just that. I kind of hesitate a bit, because every time we've added technology to the workplace, it seems like everybody's got busier. So, maybe AI will be different, but before Excel, accountants were busy. They're even busier now, even though Excel's doing a load of job that they did before. Sure. We have to be kind of realistic and careful with technology, but I do think AI will unlock things and add efficiency that we just can't dream of today.
Kind of the future, the end state, what good looks like. Let's imagine we get this right. 5 or 10 years from now, what does good look like for a local authority, NHS trust, or combined authority? What would you say?
I think one of the fundamental things that we need to get to is that social value is designed locally and by the kind of community. I think that's the starting point, is what does the community need, not what gets just pushed at them. And councils have done a really good job over the years of listening to their citizens and kind of designing services around them. But there's when we're talking about procurement and social value from suppliers, there's a big disconnect. Suppliers will just tell you what they can do from a social value perspective. What we don't have is what the community wants. And so the thing with Citizen Coin is it helps pull that demand, pulls that demand out of the community. So that's kind of job one, is understanding what social value means to the community and delivering what's of value. The second part of social and value, social, what do people want, and value, what do they kind of value? It's no good just giving them something if it doesn't really isn't the priority, isn't top of the list for the community. So that's kind of job one. And the next thing is having a delivery mechanism that pulls that social value from the supply chain all the way through the council and then gets measured and actioned upon. And that's what we've been talking about here, is generating that data at every step of that journey, and being able to see that data to check that the social value that was promised is what the community needs, and it is what's been delivered over the life of that contract. And remember, these contracts, they can last for it's not just 3 or 4 years. The same supplier can be supplying to a council for 15, 20 years. It happens, and you need to make sure that value is constantly being kind of pulled out of those contracts and delivered. And it's too easy to do it as a kind of one-off. We've been to tender, they've promised this, therefore we've done a great job. What you need is that kind of systemized approach to make sure that social value has been delivered over the life of the contract.
That's interesting. So if you have, I never looked at it that way. So if you have contractors who repeatedly win a tender in a certain area, I suppose they can deliver a consistent form of social value. If I'm getting this right, if you've got that situation changing in the tender process, and one contractor is delivering because that's the type of social value it decides to deliver, and then another contractor comes in and it has a different view on it, you've got this stop-start situation and no continuity and no continuous learning.
I think it's different in different categories of spend, I guess. But if you're in highways maintenance or you're in adult social care, there are probably big suppliers there who will often not change for many years, whereas other parts of your category can change on a kind of 3-4 year cycle. And so I think maybe what we need to do is just almost disconnect that bit from the actual, again, if what we're pulling from the system is what's needed in the community, that can change over time.
Sure.
And that pull can change over time. And it doesn't really matter whether this is a new supplier or whether it's been a supplier for 10 years, because the system is self-refreshing and pulling the demands of the community, because community demands change. There's been massive changes in what's needed in cities over the last 20 years. They're fundamentally changed, and therefore what we deliver has to change.
Do you think social value will stop being a bolt-on? Is that a fair comment? Is it a bolt-on, or is that the past, or where do you think we are now? And do you think in the future it will be more embedded as a natural part of the whole process?
Yeah, I think we are getting to a point where if you look at how much a supplier's charging and what the specification and is of what they're going to deliver, often social value is embedded in that now. And so in the best possible examples, we're embedding social value in what we do, in the specification that's starting out. But that's still very piecemeal and very hit and miss. We will continue to we are continuing on that trajectory, hopefully, where it becomes more and more embedded in the day-to-day, and suppliers are learning. When you first went out to suppliers asking for social value, they didn't know what it was. And then there's a big period where it was just like the building suppliers, construction suppliers would put apprentices in, and that everybody was happy. And we're getting more sophisticated, and we need to continue to get more sophisticated. But as we get more sophisticated, you need better systems, better measuring, more sophisticated measuring tools to make sure that because everybody knows it's relatively simple, at least, to calculate the value of somebody employed versus somebody unemployed at a young age. But it's not the be all and end all of social value. Sometimes we forget that.
And a final question, sort of reflections and a call to curiosity. If you're advising a chief exec or procurement director or the transformation board or the economic director, what mindset shift would you ask them to make?
Yeah, I think I'd be preaching to the converted, frankly. But so maybe it isn't a mind shift thing, but it's a mind shift. But I think it's to remind them to be community driven and not driven by just what the procurement department or the suppliers say they can do. What they need to do is demand that social value really makes a change in their community, that it really delivers what's needed, because suppliers need to be told that. If we just say, what social value can you deliver? They'll just deliver what is easiest for them, or just what they've always done, or what comes to mind. If you are talking about what outcomes you're trying to achieve in the community and asking them how they can meet those, help those outcomes, that's where the shift will come.
Yeah, I see. So it's maybe the challenge isn't how do we prove impact. It's more to do with how do we design systems.
Yeah, I think
Tell us.
I think you make a good point though. But proving impact is fundamental. It has to be. There's no point in saying this is what we want you to do and then say yes, we can do it. You've got to prove that it's actually done. And at the moment, we're still not doing that. But it's kind of a given. Surely everybody knows that that's what we should be doing. But it's to remember that it's kind of that. You're serving your community. Again, you don't need to preach to any chief exec in a council that they need to serve their community. That's fundamentally at the heart of what they do. But it has to extend all the way into their supply chain. Those suppliers are serving the community, and that's what they have to. Those suppliers have to be reminded of, and to pull them through to really get close to the community.
So do you have any? I'm not going to ask any more questions now. Thank you very much for imparting all your knowledge. Not all your knowledge, I'm sure, but for great experience, and I found it really fascinating. Is there anything you want to add past what we've already discussed in particular?
No, thanks, Pete. I think I feel really passionate about the ability, the fact that when we spend public money, it should be for public good, and social value is core of that, and we shouldn't forget that. And it's a big chunk of what any public authority does. They all spend lots of money. Getting the most value out of that, however you measure value, is kind of one of the biggest jobs that can be done in a council. And there's some really talented procurement people in local authorities and the wider public sector. And we need to give them all the support we can to make those changes happen.
Brilliant. No, that's really nice. Thank you for all your insight. No, thank you. It's great.